What's cooking, Timberwolves? All right, so this week we are doing meals. Okay, now, if you're gonna teach meals, if you're gonna teach how to cook an amazing dinner, you have to include homemade mac and cheese. And I am not talking about Kraft Dinner, okay? I am talking about melting, oozing, just amazing homemade mac and cheese, okay? So that is what we are going to do for today for our demo. As you can see, I'm at the school, so if the bells do ring, terribly sorry. And I think I've got all my stuff ready. Now, homemade mac and cheese takes two stages almost. You kind of make all the sauce, you make the noodles, then you put it all together and then you bake it. So that is why it is considered an intermediate recipe, but it's really easy and it's really delicious. All right, so I'm excited to show you how to do this. Let's get going. I've already washed my hands. I have preheated my oven to 350 convect or 375 bake. And in my large pot right here is some water that I am boiling with salt. Okay, now I put 5 milliliters of salt in. If you are not a salt fan, if your family does not eat a lot of salt, do not put 5 in, put 1 or 2. Okay, again, I really like salt. We eat a lot of salt in my family. I love it to flavor food, and therefore that's what I've done. So I've got my water and hopefully it's almost coming to a boil. It's just starting to boil now. I've got my noodles. Now I'm gonna make this gluten-free, dairy-free. So if your noodles puff up a little bit more, awesome, you've got gluten in yours. But I would use macaroni for this. You can use penne as well. I would not use spaghetti though. You want it to really roll around in the sauce and it just, yeah. I've also got the rest of my stuff right here, so I'll show you guys, but I am gonna be cooking this in my handy dandy loaf pan. I use this a lot, but if you've got a casserole dish at home, use that. It works really well, especially glass. But this is what we've got at school, so that's what I'm gonna use. I've also got a lot of my ingredients ready to roll as far as pre-measured goes. If you watch the stir-fry demo, a lot of it is beforehand, so you get all set up and then it kind of comes together really fast. And what you do need to make sure you're doing is while you're cooking the sauce, you're right there, you're focused there. This is the only thing you're doing because I'm gonna teach you guys how to do a roux and you wanna make sure not to burn your roux, okay? So I'm gonna bring you down and hopefully you can see what's going on here. So I do have my cheese. With mac and cheese, I would highly recommend that you pick something like cheddar or something that has a distinct flavor, okay? Now, mozzarella is delicious. It melts really fast, but it does not have a very, it doesn't have a very severe cheese flavor. It's very, very light. Okay, so anything that you're gonna do that is a white cheese, yeah, it's awesome, but I would definitely recommend that you do a cheddar, so something that's yellow, something like an older cheddar, and then I've also got like real Parmesan that I'm gonna be adding to this as well. You want that cheesy flavor. That's typically what mac and cheese is known for, okay? So I've already grated this. This is probably over 250, which is a cup, but I loves me some cheese, and this is my dairy-free cheese, and this one's the good one. So I'm just going to grate here. The rest of my cheese for my topping because it's not just enough to have so much glorious cheese in the actual macaroni. You gotta add your topping as well. Okay, so I'm going to prep this. Again, when you're grating, always go down, don't go up. And then as you go, if your fingers are getting closer and closer, make sure you go flat, okay, so that you don't accidentally take off the tip of your finger. You don't want finger in with this grated cheese. And as you go to the end, just slow down a little bit and you should be able to get it all in there, okay? And this will go in my topping, which I will mix together beforehand. Okay, so I'm done with this. And my pot right here is starting to boil. So just starting to bubble, you wanna make sure that it's a rolling bowl before you add in your macaroni. And again, make sure you've got a lid for it. And there you go. So in the meantime, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna get all my stuff together. So I have pre-measured my butter or margarine. This is 50 milliliters. I'm gonna do the exact same thing, 50 milliliters for my flour. And combining these two with heat creates a roux, okay? And that's gonna be the basis of our cheese sauce. So any sort of white sauce that you end up doing in pasta, you always make sure that you create a roux first, and that kind of gives it that thickness and that creaminess and that consistency that you really want. For my topping, I am gonna get my Parmesan, which I've got my grated Parmesan. You can use real, like the powdered stuff if you want. If you are dairy free, you can always use, this is my nutritional yeast. You can always use that instead as well. It's a really good substitute. Okay. I've got my stuff here. So to my topping, I'm gonna add my paprika and I am gonna add my seasoning salt, okay? I'm just gonna wait to see if I can get this to boil, and then I'm going to mix together my topping stuff. It's almost there. The other thing I'm gonna make sure I do is have a whisk and a wooden spoon. And the whisk is gonna make sure that my roux gets really well mixed together and that my cheese melts properly. So I've got a rolling boil right now. So if I take a look, it's definitely rolling, definitely steaming, okay? So I've got my rolling boil. I'm going to add in my noodles. I am going to grab my wooden spoon and give this a stir. So my heat on this one is high. I'm gonna turn it down just a little bit to about 6 or 7, but I do wanna make sure that it's going. So I'm going to put my lid at an angle. Your lid doesn't technically need to be back on, but I am gonna put it at an angle just so that my steam evaporates out to that side, and away I go. So for my gluten-free noodles, 4 minutes is all I need. You guys will probably need between, what is macaroni? I think it's between 8 to 11, depending on if you want it al dente. Keep in mind that you are going to be baking it as well, so you definitely want to do towards the lower end, not the higher. So I'm going to tap my timer. Okay. And wash my hands and good to go. So I'm going to prepare my topping just to make sure that I've got this so that I'm not like scrambling at the end once I start my roux. For my topping, I have my grated cheese that I'm gonna add, and then I'm gonna put my breadcrumbs over top. So I'm gonna do 50 milliliters for my breadcrumbs. I'm gonna do 1 milliliter of my paprika. I'm gonna add in my Parmesan. I will be adding in my melted butter to this as well, but I'm not gonna do it until the very end. So once I've got that together, I can take my whisk and use this just to mix it. And when I add my butter at the end, I'm gonna use my fork, and it's just gonna be like this crispy topping. It's gonna be so good. So let's talk about different flavors in this. For this, I'm gonna go very traditional. I want the cheese to be most of my flavor. But if you wanna add in spices to this, so like ginger or garlic, they taste really good. Garlic especially, you guys know that I love my garlic, okay? So if you wanted to add that in, you totally could. I'm gonna be adding in my dried mustard powder. Does not taste like tangy like mustard, but it does give a really good flavor. You could use different types of stuff with mac and cheese. There's lots of different seasonings, flavors you can add in, and it just tastes good. Think about like anything that goes with cheese, essentially you can add into this, okay? All right, so I've got this. I am now gonna start my roux. So roux is melted butter and flour. And what we're doing is we're cooking or browning the flour. And again, not browning it as in like it should change color, but we're cooking it. So what I'm gonna do then is I'm gonna prepare my pot for this. So I've got my medium to large size pot. I've got my lid, which I'm probably not gonna end up needing. And I'm going to turn this on to medium heat, okay? And I might be turning it down as I go, just because I wanna make sure I don't burn anything, especially with my butter. Now, traditionally what I end up doing is I put my butter in right off the bat, and then I let it melt as it goes. And then I slowly add in my flour and whisk it as it goes in, okay? The other thing I do is I make sure that I've got my ingredients ready to go as far as my cheese goes and my milk. And I'm gonna be using almond milk. You cannot taste it in this. Well, I don't think you can, but that's because I like almond milk and I'm used to it. But if you want to, cashew milk would actually be really good because it's a higher fat content. You do want to, with this, you do want to do a higher fat. So if you've got like a whole milk, add it, okay? It tastes so good. If not, just go for the skim milk. That's totally fine. You've got enough cheese in here and stuff like that to make it really thick and creamy. So my mustard powder, I am gonna just get that ready to roll. So it is 5 milliliters that I'm going to need. And then my seasoning salts. And my pepper. And I have a white pepper that I'm going to be using in this, so that's why it's a different color. But you guys seriously just use your regular pepper. Okay, so I've got all of this. Now my butter is starting to melt, so I'll take you along here. Okay, so I've got that going. I'm going to take my whisk and I'm going to start to melt it. And typically you don't use metal on metal, but I find that the whisk works best for this one. So if you want to, and I don't want it to burn, okay? So if you start to hear this sizzle, turn it down a little bit. And I'm like halfway there, so I'm gonna start adding in my flour. And I'm just going to start making this like almost like a paste. So I've got the rest of my butter melted, so I'm gonna add in the rest of my flour. And basically what I want to do is just get this all soaked up. And again, this is going to thicken my cheese sauce. And I do want to start to cook this flour. You never ever want to eat raw flour, okay? So I've got to make sure this is cooked. And again, it's a paste. And I'm not burning it, I'm stirring it. And I've got a good consistency here. Okay, so that's the basis of every single cheese sauce, like white sauce, like Alfredo, really anything, okay? So once you've got that and you're ready to rock and roll, good here, I'm going to slowly start adding my milk. Now, I typically only add in half of my milk, and then I add in half of my cheese. And I don't know why, it's just something I do. So what, typically, again, I'm going to stir this so that I can start cooking this in, and it gets nice and thick. And I'm going to add in some cheese. I'm going to start to melt this. And at this point, what you might need to do is turn your temperature back up to a medium heat. I'm going to add in the rest of my milk. I'm going to let this melt. So again, the cheddar is going to take the longest to melt. The mozz is going to melt no problem. So my noodles should be almost done. And again, that's because they're gluten-free. I'm just going to cut this. This is hard to do with one hand. I'm going to take my wooden spoon. And the way to tell a noodle is honestly the one that I usually use is usually by eating it. So I'll usually take out a sample. Technically, you can throw a piece of pasta against a wall and if it sticks, it's done. But your parents probably don't want you doing that. So don't just like throw macaroni all over your house, okay? All right, so I've got my noodle. Good to go. Okay, so I'm gonna take it off of the heat. And I'm gonna get my colander and I'm gonna drain it out. you can use your pan that you're going to be putting it into. So I'm going to add the rest of my cheese. And I have a lot of cheese in here, which means I might need to add a little bit more milk. Or a little bit of water. Just to give it that liquid so it can cook down. To this, I'm going to add in my seasonings, and I'm going to whisk it. Okay, so what I've got is a beautiful cheese sauce, okay? Again, if you want it to be a little bit thinner, because it is going to thicken as it cooks, I would add in a little bit more milk or water, depending on what you've got, okay? But I'm going to spread this. And I'm just scooping this out. I can either take my rubber spatula or I can take my wooden spoon. To mix this together. It's already ooey and gooey, guys. It's so delicious. I love it. Oh, my cream cheese. I love you. Okay, so while I've got this, I'm going to be putting it into here, but first I'm going to be heating up my 10 milliliters of butter or margarine. And I'm going to mix it into my breadcrumbs, but I am going to put this into my little pan. Just want to melt that all the way. Okay, so I've got this in my milk pan. I am now going to add my cheese over top, because why not? I'm going to take my melted butter and I'm going to add it to my breadcrumbs. I'm going to fold them. And then I'm going to spread them over top. And this is what I'm looking at, guys. Oh. So I am going to put it in the oven for about 15 to 20 minutes. My noodles are already pre-cooked, so I am doing that. And I will catch you on the flip side.